Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Africa for Dummies podcast, a podcast where we look at all the major headlines shaping Africa and Africa's relationships with the rest of the world. I'm your host today, as usual, Zenge. Unfortunately, Nathan couldn't make it today, but he'll definitely be on future episodes. Today, we're going to be talking about one of the most talked about diplomatic moments of the year, particularly for Africa's relationships with the rest of the world. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa's heated meeting with US President Donald J. Trump at the White House in the Oval Office. Ramaphosa went to Washington to supposedly reset relations, but instead he was ambushed on live air.
Let me clarify that, because what you saw, the speeches that were being made, they're a small minority party, which is allowed to exist in terms of our constitution.
But you do allow them to take land.
No.
You do allow them to take land.
Nobody can take land.
And then when they take the land, they kill the white farmer. And when they kill the white farmer, nothing happens to them.
No, there is quite...
Nothing happens to
them.
them.
There is criminality.
Facing accusations about land seizures and the long debunked white genocide in South Africa. But there's also a twist. South Africa isn't just any new entrant into the global diplomatic game. South Africa is a member of BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and the S is for South Africa, plus a whole lot of new members now. South Africa is also the chair of the G20, the top 20 largest economies in the world, plus the European Union and now the African Union. It's also been shaking up global diplomacy with moves like filing a case against Israel for genocide at the International Court of Justice. This is regarding the Israeli-Gaza conflict. So today we're unpacking not just what happened, but what it means for South Africa, as well as for Africa's standing in the world, and for the fight over truth and misinformation in international relations. And we also have a very special guest who we have had before, Keanen Isaacs. Keanen Isaacs has served some time at the South Africa Institute for International Affairs and also South African History Online.
I am an African.
Okay, so we've got our guest here, Keanen Isaacs, who I think many of our listeners and viewers already know by now because we have had him quite a few times, especially, in fact, probably 1 year ago, right? Because of the elections.
Almost 1 year ago.
So I think everyone knows who Keanen Isaacs is. He has served at the South African Institute of International Affairs. He's a rising expert with good insight on international relations regarding South Africa particularly, and he's also been at the South African History Online. So just to set the scene with regards to this meeting, before we delve into the actual sort of optics of the meeting, Ramaphosa, the announcement was quite sudden. Ramaphosa decided to visit the White House. And I don't know why now, because the whole South Africa tension has been happening for a while. But also South Africa is also, a member of the G20. It's a BRICS member. It's filed landmark cases against Israel. And there's a big theory that this whole fallout happened because of that rather than the Afrikaner land situation. So, and I was following, even Ramaphosa's meeting, Ramaphosa just going to the South African embassy, and him looking very optimistic. It was meant to be like this gigantic watershed moment when he came to Washington. So, just in general, could you sort of set the scene in terms of South Africa's global position with regards to BRICS? I think the BRICS was held last year or another year ago in Joburg. And then there's G20, the ICJ. How do you think these factors affect Trump and what position does South Africa really have in all of this in terms of its global stature?
Thank you. Thank you for having me again. Again, thank you to your listeners. As you rightly mentioned, South Africa hosted the BRICS Summit in 2023, which saw BRICS invite 5 other countries to join the group. These countries include Egypt, um, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Argentina, and the United Arab Emirates. As we know, Argentina hasn't joined the BRICS grouping because of the election of President Javier Milei, who has chosen to take the country in a more pro-West direction. As you also mentioned, South Africa is hosting the G20 summit later this year. I believe it will be in November in Johannesburg, and South Africa's the theme of South Africa's presidency has been a cause of concern for the US administration. Obviously, South Africa's theme focuses on equality and solidarity. South Africa has also initiated a case of plausible genocide against close US ally, the State of Israel, at the International Court of Justice, and this and a number of other issues like South Africa's close relations with US adversaries, China and Iran, has led to a deterioration in relations over the years.
Yeah, I think that's a good sort of background to where South Africa's foreign policy is at now. So recently, the main reason that seems to be a cause of concern in the US, in particular, sort of this MAGA, the Make America Great Again echo chamber, is this plight of the Afrikaners and the supposed genocide of white Afrikaners. And so we did an episode actually on the Land Act that was passed, and in a few weeks in April, I think, 60 Afrikaners, was it 60 or less than 60 Afrikaners?
It was.
Yeah.
Claims vary. So some say it's 49 and others say it's 59. But I believe the most cited number is 49.
49. And these people took up the offer by Trump. And this is out of a population of how many white people? What, 6 million, 7 million white South Africans took up this offer of asylum.
Yeah, so I think if I recently watched the Larry Madau emceeing the recent Africa CEO forum. And he spoke to, he posed a question to President Ramaphosa about the 49 Afrikaners who arrived in the US, and this has also led, to controversy both in the United States and in South Africa when the US administration announced that it will offer a path to fast track white Afrikaner South Africans, granting them refugee status. And this obviously caused controversy while the United States is expelling migrants from other countries, including the Middle East and Africa, as well as from South America. You heard him posting about sending back Venezuelan criminals coming over the borders in that very same White House meeting. So what Ramaphosa said was that, this is a fringe group of, they represent a small minority, and it's clear that the the work and talk that is currently happening in South Africa regarding transformation troubles them, and so they've left. As you know, Afrikaners are descendants of some of the first Dutch settlers who settled in Southern Africa in the 17th century. So they do have a long history in our country. They fought. So following the British invasion of Southern Africa and them establishing a Cape colony in what is today the Western Cape, the Afrikaners then founded their own. They moved north of the country in what is known as, in South African history, the Great Tree. So they moved from the south, so they moved from the Cape Colony further north up into the country and founded their own two republics, the two Boer republics. These two Boer republics eventually fought a war with the British, which culminated in the Union of South Africa.
The Anglo-Boer War,
The Anglo-Boer, yes, which is also called the South African War.
I see, okay.
But, yes, so as the Afrikaners migrated north, when they arrived to what is today Gauteng, which is the economic hub of the country, they built what is called the Voortrekker Monument. So many South Africans joked when the 49 Afrikaners arrived in the US that they went from voortrekkers to voetsekkers. So so voetsek is basically like a swear word in South Africa. It means like first off, it's Afrikaans swear word.
Yeah, they use that in Zambia.
Yeah, so
just the pronunciation is different, like voetsek.
Yeah. And I think it
like to get out
also demonstrates. Yeah. Also demonstrates how South Africans have responded, to this debacle. South Africans are some of the most resilient people in the world, and I think many a times we use humor as a way to soften, the harsh reality.
Yeah. So I think that's a good sort of like overview of it, and I think also the humorous side of it is just really distinctively South African, I think.
And also there's this claim that the 49 Afrikaners that arrived in the United States, how many of them are actually farmers? Recently, the president of the Economic Freedom Fighters, Julius Malema, who was also the star of that White House meeting.
Yeah,
he was like kind of the boogeyman. And he said, if those are farmers, then that means there are now 49 farms available that the government can expropriate. So there has been no talk about the farms that are being left behind, and many have even joked and mocked that many of those 49 Afrikaners weren't farmers, but were in actual fact car guards and attendants.
Yeah. So they're just seizing an opportunity, and it's not really defeating the purpose of the asylum itself. So I think that's a incredible background, and I like that you went through the whole history as well of Afrikaners and this sort of relationship also with the Afrikaners and the English descendants. But of course, yeah, South Africa, this is not the first time we've heard of this. It's not the first time I've heard of this white genocide. And I think we'll go through it later after we sort of discuss the actual Oval Office ambush. But yeah, it's not the first time I've heard about it. I've heard about it before. And sometimes you'd meet some white South Africans who would say, "Oh yeah, they're killing every white person," and so on. And you get the impression that that's true, and it's not. But yeah, so moving on to what actually happened at the Oval Office. Yeah, so Ramaphosa went to the Oval Office, and what was supposed to be a resetting of a relationship was basically a gigantic ambush. And I was following Ramaphosa's sort of the ramping up of the engagement, talking about it, visiting this person and that person. And then I also saw the delegation as well. It was a very interesting delegation. What do you have to say about that?
I think what the president tried to show with the composure of that delegation was basically to show strength in unity. The delegation was both black and white and included members from government, business, and labor. So obviously showing a unified approach to the situation, despite the differences these many sectors have back home.
Yeah, I mean, you had Johan Rupert. That was an interesting pick. One of the richest men in Africa, yeah, a white businessman.
Yes.
Who has multiple business interests. And then you also had two golf stars. You had two golf stars, Retef Goosen and Ernie Els. And Ramaphosa gifted him what did he gift him? A big, coffee table book.
Yes, it was a 14-kilogram book, which showcased many of the golf courses in South Africa, which are some of the best in the world. And the foreword was also written by Johan Rupert, who is the founder of Richmond and the chairperson of Remgrow.
Okay.
Like you mentioned,
so what businesses did those do? The Johan Rupert's business.
So they manage luxury brands like Cartier.
Okay.
And also the Louis Vuitton house.
Wow, that's a lot.
So they have ties in the. There's also another South African billionaire that was not in that delegation. Nicky Oppenheimer. His family owns the De Beers, who the biggest diamond conglomerate in the world. So that was an interesting
so Nicky
of the delegation.
Nick Oppenheimer was there, but he didn't say anything, yeah?
No, Nicky Oppenheimer was not in the delegation.
Oh, okay.
There was talk about including another South African golf legend, Gary Player, but because of his age and health,
was that just a nice way
couldn't travel? But there is speculation that, probably there is speculation that he didn't accept the invite because of his stance towards the South African government's case against Israel at the International Court of Justice.
Oh, okay. So there's a whole different gamble on that other side then. So he probably didn't want to come because of his dissatisfaction with the government rather than Trump himself. Okay, the South African government. That's an interesting, that's an interesting angle. So I mean, The interview, I mean the White House event happened a couple of months after the Zelensky event, and the Zelensky event went downhill very quickly and was a genuine shouting match, fingers raised, and JD Vance came in, and the popular sort of meme that came out from there was, "Did you say thank you once? Have you said thank you?" And it had its own life. And so in this case, Ramaphosa really tried to, and many people have talked about different strategies. How do you deal with Trump? Do you pamper him? Do you treat him like, an African leader who needs a huge ego boost? Or do you just talk to him fact to fact on a rational level to level basis? Or do you just, like, how do you deal with him? And Ramaphosa seems to have tried to deal with him in a sort of mature, calm way. And he was explaining very basic things, like, like he was. They played the video, and Trump said, "Dim the lights, like down the lights," and
Yeah,
he didn't want to look at the. He saw it for a few seconds, and then he just looked away. He was like, "Okay,
yeah.
yeah." So I don't know.
I think that
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the reaction from the South African delegation is exactly the same reaction millions of South Africans had when they were watching, and everyone was like, "What's happening?" Because we don't know if it was a loudspeaker, and then we saw the screen span, um to the TV, and I was that was a shocker.
Yeah, it was so unexpected, and some people claim that this is like a coordinated thing or no. But I mean, Ramaphosa responded to it. I think he was surprised. I'm not sure if it was coordinated, because Ramaphosa responded to it, and he had to sort of break down very basic things and say, "No, that is an opposition leader. We have a multi-party system. Basics, very basics of democracy." And I don't know how Trump would feel if we played a video of Joe Biden and asked him to answer for that. Like, and there was Malema there, as you said, the book, sort of the star of the show, the boogeyman, and he was singing the song "Kill the Boer," the wartime struggle song, which, funny enough, even Mandela has sung back in the 1990s. Jacob Zuma, they also had a clip of Jacob Zuma, the former president of South Africa, who is now leader of one of the largest political parties. So, what's your take on that specifically? The idea of sort of putting that video up there, and how do you think Ramaphosa handled it? Do you think Ramaphosa could have been a bit more tougher? Could have just said, "You know what? I won't sit down for this. I'll walk away," or should he, like, yeah? What's your opinion?
Yeah, so many back home felt Ramaphosa was not firm enough in dispelling claims of a white genocide, and also the failure to use figures and statistics to support this and dispel the claim that there's a white genocide. Many commentators in South Africa believe he did his best in a hostile environment and attempted to steer the meeting back to issues around trade, many times emphasizing trade is essential to growing South Africa's economy and to creating jobs, which is the main issue. So his focus was on trade. As you mentioned, it was not an official state visit, but a 2-day working visit to the United States. So, according to official statements from government officials and officials in the presidency, the working visit was to reset or stabilize relations with the United States in an aim to reduce tensions and preserve space for diplomatic and commercial engagement. So many in the South African delegation knew that there would be some surprises, but no one could have foreseen that Trump actually prepared a media presentation to ambush the South African delegation. And as you rightly mentioned, it was John Steenhuisen who clarified that Julius Malema is in actual fact leader of one of the opposition parties in South Africa with who obviously has far and left policies, and the issue around the kill the Boer chant, as you rightly mentioned, it was a song sung during the struggle days of apartheid, and basically it was sung alongside other struggle songs like One Settler, One Bullet. So at the time, organizations like the African National Congress and the United Democratic Movement led the anti-apartheid struggle, and in many of the conferences and meetings they would sing these songs as a clarion call and as a unifying call. So the argument that is that what place does it have in a post-apartheid democratic South Africa? And this issue has also been at the courts. As you know, South Africa is a constitutional democracy, and the Constitutional Court has ruled regarding the protection of freedom of speech in the Constitution. So there is that debate and discussion currently happening. What is the place of these struggle songs, and how does it actually make white people and Afrikaners in particular in South Africa feel? Does it alienate them? Does it endanger them? So there is that discussion happening.
The irony here is that the right are very forthright. That's a strange pun, but they're very forthright in their in their sort of hatred for cancel culture. I mean, I hate cancel culture as well, but on one hand, one type of cancel culture is wrong, and then this type of cancel culture is right, where the interests of white people and pronouncements that somewhat threaten or strike a degree of fear, even albeit historical fear, of white people is wrong and should be cancelled. But the ability to even set up white-only communities like Orania, which has gained increased fame. I mean, it's been there for a while. I heard of Orania a long time ago, but a few YouTubers have gone and given it a new lease of life, given the context. I don't know. I mean, there's also that debate even in other countries. In the UK, the full official national anthem also includes Kill the Scots at the end of the national anthem, although that verse is not sung today. And it's considered phased out, but it's there. So you can debate all sorts of ways when it comes to these things. And I found it very strange.
Yeah, that's another.
Why didn't you ban? Why haven't you suspended Ramaphosa for singing that and so on? So yeah, I mean.
Yeah, and that brings into the question of freedom of speech. So in South Africa, you can't arrest someone because he's singing a song, "Kill the Boer, kill the farmer." And another argument is that song has been sung for many years, and there's no correlation between the singing of that song and an increase in the murder of, in particular, white farmers.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think this is a good segue for us to go into the actual facts and the myths behind all of this. So, the South Africa's police minister, Senzo Mchunu, provided some data that from January to March 2025, 5 of 6 farm murder victims were black and only 1 was white. From October to December 2024, 12 farm murders occurred. Only one was a white farm owner. And also, first-time data was broken down by race to which clearly sort of debunks this idea that it's even when in the farming community, it's still black farmers who are also being killed, you know. I think many of the South African courts have also repeatedly dismissed the idea of a white genocide, which has sort of been peddled by AfriForum, which is a sort of white interest group, I think. And
It's AfriForum and Solidarity or Solidarity.
Yeah, they have very African sort of nice sounding names, but their intentions are very malign. And this idea, even when the sanctions came, they didn't like the sanctions because they realized it affected them. Yeah, so the one thing I think really irritates me about the narrative is the idea that they make when they do this sort of it's almost become a cookie cutter story of how South Africa is explained in right wing media, that Mandela was there and then after that everything crashed. Like it just became a typical African tin pot dictatorship. And I saw something where the AfriForum sort of leader or figurehead was being interviewed by Tucker Carlson, the Fox News. Fox News is a sort of right-wing, sort of Trump-aligned media house in the United States. And he was almost like with a bit of a grin in his face saying, you know, Mandela is not all so nice, you know. He was actually killing people. He was actually this. And, you know, the funny thing is the idea of this to upset people or what? Because I think many people across Africa, particularly black people, prefer the Mandela, the freedom fighter, who, yes, is responsible for certain deaths. In the same way that George Washington is responsible for certain deaths during the Civil War, and the same way that Winston Churchill is responsible for deaths during World War II. You know, and there's always this narrative, like trying to, you know, the same people that hated Mandela are now trying to say, oh, you have veered off the rails of Mandela, and as though, like, even during the time of Mandela, there was a court case that I saw that was the Rugby Union, I think, took Mandela to court for being racist. I mean, the lines were that he was being racist to some degree or another. Yeah, so to me, it's just hypocritical. It's very hypocritical. The narrative of this, there was Mandela at this point, and then after that, everything just became a dog's fest, and South Africa is a failed state. They're almost speaking of it in the same way that, like, you know, you'd speak of, let's say, the DRC under Mobutu. Like, come on, guys, you know. And I think there's so much myth busting and narrative manipulation that is being done that it sometimes gets a bit overwhelming, especially when people just try and reduce it to some black government trying to grab land from innocent white people. That's like the headline, you know. So yeah, I think that really pisses me off a lot.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. Recently, video has resurfaced of President Mandela, and he's responding to the behavior of the United States at that time. I believe this is shortly after he became president, and he was saying that in 1945, during World War II, when Japan was retreating on all fronts. The United States dropped the atom bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, killing hundreds of thousands, if not millions. And many of those people at that time still experienced the effects of those bombs. And recently, our own president, before he went to the United States, said that, when he said that when he meets Trump, he'll tell him, President Trump, your forebears were even far worse. They nearly wiped out the indigenous
Indian,
Americans,
Native Americans.
the Native Americans, nearly killed all of them. So it's right as you mentioned, who is the West or the United States to be the moral police of the world when they've done unspeakable horrors in the past, not to mention slavery and colonialism.
Yeah. And I think go ahead.
Yeah, what was also frustrating about what Donald Trump mentioned was that when President Ramaphosa said that, the South African government is still embarking on the process of redistributing land, as to redress the legacy of colonialism and apartheid, and mentioned that just like the United States government has the right to expropriate land for public use, so the South African government also does. And Trump responded and said, but you're not doing that. He said the farmers are being killed by people and no consequences exist for those people. So another narrative is that needs to be challenged is that all farmers are white, and that the majority of people working on the farms are white as well. As you mentioned, the recent crimes stats show that out of the majority of farm attacks or farm murders are affecting Black people more. So there are a number of small scale Black farmers in South Africa as well. So that was also frustrating that
Exactly.
in these farm attacks, Black people are also being killed.
Yeah. And I think the only person that really put out the statistics was the lady. I think she's from the Women's Trade Union or the Trade Union. She was quite strong in presenting the statistics that I thought Ramaphosa would provide. Talking about the
Yes, she's the president of the Confederation of South African Trade Unions, Ms. Zungiswa.
Yeah, and she was very strong on the facts and the fact that it's a crime problem, not necessarily a race problem. And I think they could have given her more time to speak, because she really gave the facts that you can't really deny. Everything else was more sentimental, Rupert Murdoch smoozing and trying to basically say, oh, look, Trump, let's work together. We're friends in New York. Steenhuisen, some people believe Steenhuisen threw Ramaphosa under the bus in a way, because he was first saying that the government was useless, and then when we came, we are trying to make it better. So he was like also exposing the cracks. But Rupert Murdoch, and this has gone around a bit as well, Rupert Murdoch basically said Western Cape is full of crime, and it's like he was lecturing Steenhuisen. So for a listener, John Steenhuisen is the leader of the Democratic Alliance, which is predominantly the dominant party in the Western Cape, where the city of Cape Town is, and they formed a government. So if you want to know about that, you can check our previous episodes. Yeah. So that was an interesting angle.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I
So
think yeah, go ahead.
basically, yeah, Johan Rupert was saying that uh, the crime is bad, and that in actual fact, the province where the DA governs, the Western Cape, the highest murder rate is on the Cape Flats, and that is um, a true statistic. Some of the areas in Cape Town have the highest murder rates. These include Langa and uh, areas like Guguletu on the Cape Flats. So yeah, so because of the of gangsterism and violent crime, they even had to deploy the army some number of years ago because the gang violence was getting out of hand. So the South African army was deployed to support the South African police conducting raids and seizures.
So I mean, it's clear that it's really a crime, an issue of crime. It's just that when white people are affected, somehow it is an issue of race. But I think let's go to just a simple myth busting. First of all, as we have mentioned the facts already, but also the pictures that Trump produced were also false. There was one picture depicting something that was actually happening in Congo, in the DRC. And then there was also a video of trucks with crosses, and that was actually the murder of two white people, and those crosses were eventually removed. So I don't know what the threshold for genocide is, but I don't think it is two. But yeah, it's clear that there was a lot of information that was just thrown, and there's very little time was given for fact checking. I really don't know who actually gives these briefs and decides to do these presentations, because I expect that there's people in the White House who are able to do a simple Google on statistics and just say, okay, even if we're trying to spin a narrative, let's like stick to facts, So it's not what it looked like was a blatant attempt to just throw out falsehoods, very blatant. So let's just look at now. Go ahead.
That also raises an important point about facts, and it's clear that the South African delegation's focus was not to debunk any myths or claims of genocide, and I think it's because they recognize that the Trump administration and President Trump himself is not concerned about facts. It's more about his claim of white genocide speaks to his domestic base as well of, finding white victims across the world.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think as Sizwe Mpofu said, it's in his Times article, is now a wedge issue in domestic policy, in domestic political discussions now. It's no longer just like a foreign policy file that is like, a foreign country. It's like a MAGA issue now. But I think let's look at sort of the bigger picture and Ramaphosa's diplomatic goals. Do you think Ramaphosa has achieved what he was trying to achieve? And what, if you're in sort of Ramaphosa's position, do you think you would have done anything differently? And also the Starlink question, the richest man in the world has roots in South Africa. And until one day ago or so, stepped down from a highly influential position, although we don't know if his influence will diminish, but in his official capacity is not there. Elon Musk, the issue of Starlink, and the government now suddenly welcoming Starlink. Starlink's provision to Africa is sort of these low orbiting satellites that provide good connectivity in the most remote areas, which can be good for education and so on, but is also being abused by terrorist activities. Terrorist activities in parts of northern Africa and west the Sahel region also.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about the whole? Has he actually achieved what he was supposed to achieve? And generally, also, how are South Africans receiving it? Did they see it as this win that they were trying to portray? And do you think South Africa should just now stop trying to make peace with America or trying to cozy up to them because it seems like they don't want to, you know? Or do you think it would be like a Zelensky situation where like all of a sudden they'll meet at some occasion and they'll be like, oh, okay, actually things are back to normal, you know?
Yeah, so I think the jury is still out on whether President Ramaphosa's visit to the White House was a success or not. But I think in the purpose of the visit was to reset or stabilize relations with the United States, as I mentioned, to open the space for commercial and diplomatic engagement. So there are signs that the relationship is moving to a more constructive footing underpinned by economic and diplomatic factors. And in a number of G20 working groups, the United States hasn't been completely absent. So they have engaged in several high-level meetings taking place in South Africa and recently in the United States.
So, and also with the Starlink question, do you think, and Citizen Pope Walsh said this in his own podcast, should South Africa, is it the right thing to accept Starlink after basically being bullied into accepting Starlink? Or should they just, say no?
Yeah, so many South Africans had the idea that, the meeting was, that the whole meeting was basically a smoke show to allow Elon Musk's Starlink to be able to operate in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you would know, as part of South Africa's attempt at redressing the legacy of apartheid.
Yeah.
The South African government has a number of policies aimed at economic and social redress. And one of these policies, which has recently come into light, is the Black Economic Empowerment.
BE.
So the BE policy has basically hindered Starlink's ability to operate in the country. So in order for Starlink to operate in the country, it needs to have at least 30% Black ownership.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way Elon Musk is going to be giving up 30% of his company.
Yeah.
So recently, the Minister of Communications, Mr. Solly Malatsi, has proposed policy changes in a new government gazette to, they claim it's aimed at creating a more competitive environment. And obviously the timing of this government and policy changes is a bit concerning.
Yeah. It's not a coincidence.
Yeah, but I think what the U.S. White House visit also shows us that in both delegations, in both the South African and U.S. Delegation present, it shows us the power of business and how in modern times business and politics have become intertwined to a certain point where basically people were saying that, Elon Musk is running the United States.
Yeah.
In the same way that people will say, Johan Rupert is running South Africa because he funds both South Africa's biggest parties. So basically people were saying, South Africa's real boss was in the room. Johan Rupert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. The play of oligarchs from different countries. One is just bigger than the other. And funny enough, both the oligarchs controlling the presidents in those rooms were from South Africa, were white South Africans, originally at least. Both Elon Musk and Johan Rupert. So yeah.
So I think there is some success in Ramaphosa's visit in the sense that the visit created a pathway, and thus led to so relations haven't deteriorated further. So there's still a bit of a cold, but we are moving towards a warming of relations. Obviously, the United States is a important partner for South Africa. It's our third largest trade partner, and the idea of the visit was to secure trade. And obviously, with Trump's recent announcement of a 30% tariff increase on South Africa, basically nullifies the preferential trade agreement South Africa has with the United States, known as AGOA.
Yeah.
So this is a free preferential trade agreement with the United States, which enables South Africa to export goods to the United States duty-free. So with Trump's recent announcement of a 30% tariff increase, this has basically nullified the AGOA agreement, and this will have a huge impact on South Africa's citrus industry and automotive industry as well. So we also went there to save jobs.
Yeah. I think that was the crux of the matter, to save jobs. And I think you're right. There is some positivity in it, in that there's still that door and willingness to discuss and talk. It was definitely entertainment, but at least it's an attempt that South Africa is not at least willing to talk to Trump. Hopefully it amounts to something positive. But I think that's a good way to sort of.
And I think back home as well, it's given the government some sense of legitimacy, and with the composure of Ramaphosa and the South African delegation, South Africa has also gained international recognition and international legitimacy for its government of national unity.
Yeah, I think the word composure is great, because Ramaphosa is one of his sort of greatest skills is this skilled negotiator. He was the chief negotiator during apartheid, and someone who has dealt with actual official racists, dealing with the MAGA establishment. I don't think it was the worst thing, the most difficult thing for him. and he did keep his composure. He did reassure, and I think most people objectively watching would say Ramaphosa did his best. I think very few presidents can do better than that without losing their cool. Yeah, I think that's a good way to sort of close it down, unless you have any final thoughts.
Yeah. So another offer South Africa put on the table was, apart from the Starlink deal, was centered around digital trade, liquefied natural gas, and critical minerals. And we know that critical minerals is essential part of just energy transition, because many of the technologies that are being used in the just energy transition are critical minerals, and many of these critical minerals are being mined in Africa. As you know, the issue in the DRC as well.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and
so this is also linked to Trump's vision of building up, rearming the United States military. He's recently mentioned the development of the Golden Dome.
Yeah, but the thing here is now, I think Ben Rhodes, an advisor to Barack Obama in the White House during his time as president, did mention something about this, and it's very, it's very unhelpful to your own American interests themselves to sort of try and belittle and humiliate South Africa, which is a member of the G20, a key member of the African Union, one of the biggest contributors. So in many ways, it is sort of the taster of what other African leaders will look at when they see that engagement with Trump. Will other African leaders be interested in engaging with Trump then? You are giving a major player on the African continent a hard time, and it's likely that many other African countries would not be that pleased or that interested in meeting Donald Trump, particularly in that sort of theater that has now become the Oval Office following Zelensky's meeting and Trump's meeting. So I think the critical minerals is an interesting thing, but if they really were interested in the critical minerals, I think they wouldn't have, sacrificed an entire meeting with the president of South Africa just to sort of, as Ben Rhodes said, to entertain Proud Boys. Proud Boys, that right-wing, alt-right-wing group in the United States, and sort of that echo chamber, is not in the interest of the United States. I totally agree with what Ben Rhodes said. If you really want to be interested, there's countries like China that are very active. There's countries like Russia that are increasingly active, and they have their own misinformation narrative. Not that the West hasn't used misinformation. They have. I mean, we're talking about it right now, Trump, but everyone is trying their hardest to understand and strategically work with Africa to achieve their interests. So even if you don't care about Africa and you care about your own interests, you wouldn't waste your opportunity with probably one of the most influential presidents in Africa like that.
Yeah, I think that probably underscores the recent US push for peace. As Trump mentioned in that White House meeting, that he recently secured a deal between the DRC and Rwanda. And we obviously know that in that conflict, a number of minerals that are under rebel controlled areas in the Congo are finding itself in Rwanda and then being shipped to international markets.
Yeah. So I think that's an interesting thing, because it will be interesting to see how it plays out, really. And I think that's perhaps a good way to to close it off, and I think there'll be more podcasts on this, more discussion on this in the future. So unless you have any last shots, or key facts that you think maybe people should be asking, we can go ahead and close the episode.
I'll just have some broader reflections.
Please. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the main lesson that we can learn or that African governments can learn from this whole event was, have a plane to offer.
Yeah.
If
Have
you
a
want.
plane. Are you referring to Qatar?
Yes, I'm referring to the
I was thinking
the
about
NBC reporter,
yeah.
Peter Alexander, who asked President Trump about the recent gift
And they threw him out.
he received, or not that he received, that the US Air Force received from Qatar, which will be used as Air Force One. And President Ramaphosa, amusingly said, I don't have a plane to give you. And I think that underscores, modern politics, and what kind of person Trump is, especially he's a transactional person. I think that's basically why he loves the Arab countries, because when he goes there, they basically roll out the red carpet for him. He also has this affinity for
strong
dictators. Strong men, and loves military parades. Apparently, there'll be a military parade in Washington D.C. I think for the 4th of July.
Yeah, it's very, very Trumpian, and I think that's
I think for the lesson for African leaders is, if you're meeting President Donald Trump, they have a plane to offer.
Yeah, so have a plane to offer. That's a good, humorous but very heavily loaded, if you actually think about it. That's a very good way to sort of end it. Yeah. So first of all, I just want to thank you again for joining us in this deep dive. Once again, on a short notice.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
thank you for having me.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us in this episode, everyone. It's of course, we were talking about South Africa and its place in the world after the showdown between Cyril Ramaphosa and Donald Trump. If you have enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend, tag us on your socials, and let us know, how do you think African leaders should respond when global powers twist their stories? We're on basically every podcast platform. We're very active on Instagram, and make sure you follow, like, subscribe, our YouTube also, and share, and reach out to us. You can DM us, email us in any way possible, and leave us a 5-star rating if you're on Spotify. So until next time, I'm Zenge, and this is Africa for Dummies, where we break it down so you can understand the bigger picture. Thanks.
I am an African.